Evergreen High sat in the kind of town people call safe, the sort of place where neighbors wave as you drive by, where the biggest headline in the local paper might be about a football game or a new stoplight. The school itself was nothing unusual. Red brick walls, rows of lockers painted a dull green, classrooms filled with chatter, notes being passed behind teachers' backs, the occasional scolding for a late assignment. Parents dropped their kids off without a second thought. Evergreen wasn't a place for crime. It wasn't a place for fear, which is why what happened next would strike so deeply, because the darker the crime, the more haunting it feels when it comes to a town that thought it was untouchable. It was August 29th. The morning began like any other. Students filed through the hallways, some still rubbing sleep from their eyes, others gossiping about last night's texts or who liked who. By second period, the school had settled into its usual rhythm. Teachers at the whiteboards, the faint smell of coffee drifting from the faculty lounge. Nothing out of place. But at exactly 10:15 a.m., that rhythm snapped. The first sound was sharp, metallic, out of place in the stillness of a classroom. Some thought it might have been construction outside. Others, maybe fireworks. But then came another, and another. Confusion shifted to realization. Then realization turned into fear. Evergreen High was under attack. Beat of silence. The first thing witnesses described was the noise. Deafening, echoing. Shots bouncing off lockers and walls, ringing in ears. Students screamed. Some bolted into hallways, their sneakers pounding against tile as they sprinted toward exits. Others froze, unable to move, caught between instinct and shock. Teachers shouted commands. Get down. Stay quiet. Lock the doors. Chairs scraped across floors as desks were shoved against doors. Entire classrooms crouched in silence, every breath held. One student would later tell investigators, it felt like the building was alive. Every creak, every slam, every sound made us jump. I thought the door was going to open any second. Meanwhile, calls flooded 911. There are shots. Please send help. We're locked in the science lab. We don't know what's happening. The words shots fired repeated again and again. By then, Evergreen was no longer a school. It was a battleground. When the first police units arrived, chaos greeted them outside the school. Students stumbled out of side doors, crying, some barefoot, some with injuries from the stampede to escape. Parents had already begun to arrive too, their faces painted with panic as they scanned the crowd for familiar faces. Inside, officers entered cautiously, guns drawn, ears straining to locate the source. The echo of gunfire in school hallways made it nearly impossible to tell which direction it came from. Every classroom door could hold terrified students, or the person responsible. Every decision had to be made in seconds. Officers swept room by room. Shouts of "Police! Hands up!" mixed with the sobs of students raising shaking arms. They had trained for this moment, but no training truly prepares you for the screams of children or the sight of backpacks abandoned mid-run. By the time order was restored, Evergreen was changed forever. Among the victims were students, young, bright lives cut short before they'd even reached adulthood. They were kids with dreams, some who loved soccer, some who spent hours drawing, some who had just gotten their driver's licenses. Their futures stolen in an instant. There were teachers too, men and women who had dedicated their lives to shaping futures, who made split-second choices to protect their students. Some put themselves directly in harm's way. Their names would be spoken at vigils, their faces printed on posters, candles flickering beneath them. For their families, the world ended that day. For the survivors, every hallway at Evergreen would forever carry ghosts. Once the scene was secure, investigators got to work. The questions were immediate. Who was responsible? Why Evergreen? Was it targeted or random? Detectives combed through evidence. Shell casings, witness statements, surveillance footage. They interviewed students, pieced together timelines, tried to trace the moments leading up to the first shot. But as the investigation unfolded, more questions piled on. Were there warning signs? Had someone missed them? Could this have been prevented? For every theory, there was a hole. For every clue, another contradiction. And in the quiet hours after the chaos, parents were left with the hardest question of all. Why my child? The days that followed Evergreen were unlike anything the town had ever seen. The school, once filled with laughter and energy, became a shrine. Fences lined with flowers, handwritten notes taped to walls. "We love you," and "Never Forgotten" scrawled on posters in shaky handwriting. At night, vigils lit up the streets, candles in hundreds, held by shaking hands, tears dripping onto wax. Strangers embraced like family. Teachers sobbed openly. Entire rows of students stood together, silent, clutching one another as if letting go would mean losing more. But grief was only one part. There was also anger. Parents demanded accountability. Politicians promised action. The media swarmed, their cameras capturing every sob, every hug, every unanswered question. Evergreen had become a headline, but for those who lived it, it was a wound, one that would never fully heal. Now, more than 2 decades later, Evergreen is still remembered in hushed tones. For outsiders, it's a case study. For those inside, it's a scar. Students who survived are now adults. Some speak publicly about that day, hoping their voices prevent another tragedy. Others stay silent, carrying their memories like a locked box. Teachers still feel the weight. Parents still visit graves. Siblings still tell stories of brothers and sisters they lost too soon. The building has been repainted, the classrooms remodeled, but memory has no paint. The echo of that day still lingers. As with so many true crime stories, the tragedy of Evergreen High leaves us with more questions than answers. It challenges the illusion of safety. It reminds us how fragile normalcy truly is. When we talk about Evergreen, we're not just talking about a crime scene. We're talking about lives interrupted, about futures stolen, about the resilience of a community that learned, in the harshest way possible, how quickly everything can change. The mystery may remain unsolved. The pain may never fade. But the names of the victims, the courage of the survivors, and the lessons of that day will never be forgotten. This is Evergreen. This is true crime.